and he is going to be on the left playing against Mike Nyberg playing green-red monsters. Kent without his hoodie for, I believe, the first time on camera. So this is really not a good idea from Kent.
So my understanding, Ketter is playing the list that you were advocating earlier. You built this list in part to add some clean spot removal spells to get an edge in the red-green mirror.
That's correct. I'm not the biggest fan of Gorkline Rampager. I have no problem with the card. I just felt like you can do better for a 4-mana spell that you can play on turn number 3. I don't think anyone's too excited to actually hardcast Gorkline Rampager. And I think you're very excited to hardcast Reaper of the Wilds. And, you know, the fact that with Reaper and Courser and Domri and Scrylands, you get to see a lot of cards per game. And that's something that an aggressive deck should not be able to do, in my opinion. But we'll see if things go that way. I know that, you know, in my opinion, I feel like this matchup is pretty good for you, but there are a lot of things that are important, one of which is acceleration, because you can fall too far behind, and both players have it here in the form of Elvish Mystic. We see this a lot in Green Mirrors, too, where just acceleration is just so important. We see Mizzy and Mortars take care of Elvish Mystic because, again, staying ahead of your opponent in Green Mirrors, not just this one, but, you know, over the course of Magic history, is super important.
Yeah, and there's not a ton of Mortars targets in these decks as well. It's basically just Storm Breath Dragon we're looking at.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's small stuff.
And that's part of the reason, again, you see an Elvish Mystic after Blood Crit comes into play tap. You know, on Kent's side, Ken has access to 4 Mortars, and Mortars is actually better against green-red monsters because they have Courser, but some of the things that they ramp into, Storm Breath and Rampager are both 4/4s, where the cards that Jund Monsters ramps into, yes, Storm Breath is obviously 4 toughness, but Pulukranos and Reaper have 5 toughness.
Yeah.
So your Mortars are actually better against them than Mortars they have for you, but 2 Mortars are going to take care of both the Mystics that Ketter has played, so no acceleration here, and looks like he's going to fire from Mortars of his own to take care of Elvish Mystic, and no third land here from Kent. Now there's a Domri for Nyberg, and we'll see what this is going to do.
I think both players are out of lands here, so.
There's a Rampager, and I think you're right, yep. So let's see if Kent can find his third one. The answer is no. He does have a Scavenging Ooze to play, and that's what he's going to do. Pass the turn back. He's hoping that Nyberg doesn't find a land, but he does.
Yeah, if Nyberg doesn't find a land there, it's very good as that Ooze can, you know, get kind of big and start getting some life, but that Domri fight that turn is a really big swing.
Ketter draws an Overgrown Tomb for the turn, and does have a Mizzy and Mortars to cast, so there goes the Rampager, but he's got to get that Domri off the table because that's providing a ton of ammunition right now. Let's see what Nyberg draws. Draws on land. He can fire off Storm Breath Dragon if he'd like, but he's going to start by checking with Domri. There is a Gorkline Rampager. That's going to go to the grip. There's a Mountain and Dagron.
Domri on a bit of a heater thus far.
2 for 2 is not so bad.
Finding creatures while drawing lands is about as good as it gets.
I'm inclined to agree. As you do see Temple of Bandit come in, it's going to keep the card on top for Ketter. And looks like he might play a Domri. He does. And is he going to up this? He will. There's a Storm Breath Dragon for Kent. And I wouldn't be surprised to see his Domri bite the dust this turn. Domri, a really important card in this matchup, too.
Yeah, it seems like the minus power actually matters quite a bit, too.
Yeah. And Nyberg actually drew one of the best cards in this matchup on both sides, which is Xenagos God of Revels, because it closes the game out incredibly fast. Can't get it off the table. It's just it's a huge pain in the neck as Elvish Mystic's going to go to the grip. Now here's another Storm Breath Dragon, and I wouldn't be surprised either if he just ignores Domri and just says, you know, attack you for 8, but he will get that off the table, knowing that Xenagos can finish it off next turn.
Yeah. Better safe than sorry. He can split up, you know, his 2 Storm Breaths are lethal next turn.
Yeah. So you do see the 2 dragons in the air. We're going to see Pulukranos come into play here for Kent, which plays a really big role in this matchup because it does have 5 toughness. But we're going to see Nyberg here attack, and there's a Rampager. Doesn't show Ketter the Xenagos, which I think is really smart, because Ketter knew about, obviously, the Gorkline Rampager. So, oh, look who's putting the hoodie back on. Interesting. Guy thinks he can take his hoodie off when he plays Magic. No. I don't think so. Mike Nyberg does win game number 1 here over Kent. You see Kent say, yeah, what am I doing? Taking the hoodie off. I'm so stupid.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to the sideboards here. I've got Kent's deck list in front of me, obviously. 2 Rakdos Return, 2 Golgarian Charm, 2 Abrupt Decay, 2 Ultimate Price, 2 Gruul Charm, 2 Dreadbore, a Xenagos, a Ruach Thar, and a Sire of Insanity are the 15 that he's working with. I know in this particular matchup, the card that I like to board out first is Courser of Krufix. When you take a look at the cards that you have access to just in your deck, acceleration is obviously very important in that game, so you can't cut Caryatid or Mystic. The cards that you're ramping to are very important. Dragon, Reaper, and Pulukranos, so you don't want to cut those. Mortars is important to stop acceleration, as we saw in that game. Domri is important. Dreadbore kills things. Scavenging Ooze is a 2-mana threat that can turn into a 6/6, so it leaves you with really no other option as far as cards to cut go.
Yeah, the deck's all good stuff, so it's really hard to find a lot of obvious targets, right?
Yeah, and realistically, you know, if you look at the cards here, no one's saying Courser's a bad card, of course, but in the context of this matchup, what's Courser going to attack through or block? nothing.
Right, very little.
So the fact that you are able to put some lands into play is certainly nice. So, but at the end of the day, all these other cards are more important. So, I cut Coursers in this matchup. I like to bring in the other 2 Dreadbores because you want to be able to actually kill the thing that they're ramping to, or be able to kill Domri, which played a huge role in that game. I love the Xenagos, God of Revels, as we saw in that game, would have played a huge role had it needed to come down. And you can also make an argument for ultimate price in this matchup as well, because it does kill Pulachronos, which is important. Also kills Mana Accelerants, and lastly can kill Scavenging Ooze or Stormbreath Dragon. So, pretty straightforward stuff here, actually.
Sure. On the other side of the table, Michael's working with 2 Chandra Powermasters, 2 Unravel the Aethers, 2 Sharks, 2 Rorquals, 2 Plummets, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, 2 Arbor Colossus. Not actually a lot for mirror matches. I like Arbor Colossus a lot in this.
Really scary.
Arbor Colossus is huge. It's a great answer to Stormbreath Dragon. And it's just another awesome big thing to be ramping into.
That's a really scary card that I haven't had the opportunity to test when playing this deck. I played 1 at the PTQ I went to in Portland, but I never drew it. I only played 3 rounds. I never drew it. Only had 1 in my sideboard. Nothing to really learn from that situation. But the times where I have been testing this deck and playing Screwhead Monsters, every time my opponent does cast an Arbor Colossus, I'm just like, oh god, I have to kill that right now.
Arbor Colossus in my mind is one of the lesser played cards. We've seen it in green devotion lists. It's probably the most common place. I remember I was playing some games on Magic Online right when Theros came out, and I was still not 100% familiar with the Theros spoiler at this point, and someone cast an Arbor Colossus against me, and I was like, this is a real thing? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
It's it's obviously a very fair and honest Magic card, but it was just a lot of numbers. I was not anticipating something that large for that cost with additional text.
It's very scary because it can certainly roadblock you, because one of the things you want to do in this matchup is you want to be the first person to cast Pulachronos. And the reason for that is because when you're both accelerating, you play the 5/5 first and they play their 5/5, you can get a little creative with Monstrosity for 1 and Domri it, Monstrosity for 1 and Mortars it, and the 5/5 plays a huge role. The text doesn't come up a ton, but just the fact that it's a 4-mana 5/5 that you can guess on turn 3 is a big deal. Well, when they play an Arbor Colossus, they get to brick wall your 5/5 with a 6/6, and then heaven forbid they're attacking and they're Gore Clan rampaging or Domri with it. That's when things get really, really ugly for you. And as you mentioned, Stormbreath Dragon, it brick walls that too.
Yeah, it feels like this matchup is very much about who's on the front foot.
Yeah.
As the chunks of damage are so huge, and most of your cards don't do anything until you get to untap.
Yes.
So being the one that's leveraging your advantage seems like a big deal.
Acceleration is so important in this matchup.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of other matchups in this kind of red-green-esque history where accelerating was so important.
Fires.
I wasn't there. I was going to go to that. I wasn't playing competitively then, but from what I've read and seen when I was a kid, it was the person who just accelerated to fires and then went crazy just won.
Yeah. And so the mirror match was a lot about, assault battery or random things to break serve, because, and we see shades of that in standard as well, where people bring in shocks against these sort of decks to try to pin down the mana acceleration. You
see the importance of Sylvan Charioteer here because it can't be killed via Mizium Mortars. It's a really, really big deal, as Kent is going to play a Domri on this turn, so he's not going to be able to play a 4-mana creature on turn 3 this go around. He's just going to play a Stomping Ground and pass the turn back. So got to be a little scared here that Mike has something to actually cast ahead of schedule. You see Mike's hand right now. He's got 2 copies of Mortars in his hand. I believe a Domri and a 4-mana Xenagos. But a little inconclusive. Might be a Stormbreath Dragon instead there.
It does look like Stormbreath is in the grip as well.
Okay, so he's got Domri right here. He's going to tick this up as well. He's able to hit, so he's 3 for 3, and accelerant is certainly important here. He's going to take 2 to get that accelerant into play, which is important for him as well, because now he can cast Mizium Mortars next turn.
Yeah.
And that's huge, as Ketter's going to take a draw here.
It's interesting to see if Ken is going to try to play something and use Domri to fight this turn to pin down the mana.
There's a Dreadboard to take care of that Domri. See what the follow-up's going to be. There's a Scavenging Ooze. It's a pretty good turn here from Kent. I think you're going to want to fight, and so he's going to go up. So this opens himself up to getting Mortars. I say fight because I can see the cards in Nyberg's hand.
Right, it requires Mortars and an untapped land, which this deck doesn't have. It's asking a lot here, but this is pretty rough for Kent.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he's only losing a Sylvan Caryatid and a Scavenging Ooze. It's not the end of the world as far as overloaded Mortars go, but
I agree.
I'm sure Kent was hoping this would not happen.
Yeah. He's going to add a mana here. He's going to remove the Domri with the Scavenging Ooze pass the turn back. I mean, he's the one that's got the Domri on 5 going up to 6. So, he's doing okay now. He just drew another Domri, which isn't great, but let's see what he finds right now. He misses again. He's just going to play a Stomping Ground and pass the turn back here. So Nyberg's going to untap. He's going to take a draw. There's another copy of Stormbreath Dragon, so he's doing pretty good right now. There's a Forest that's going to come into play. Now there's the 4-4 flyer. We'll see where the attackers do go, because Mystic and Dragon get to come in. They're going to go towards Domri. There's an ultimate price to take care of the Dragon, so Domri's going to go down to 5. See what Ketter can find. Going to tick up, as we knew his top card was useless. This one's a miss too.
These players have had very different power levels of their Domris
Yes,
thus far.
they have. Yes, they have. So Nyberg draws a card. It's a forest. Now both players are kind of flooding out a little bit here. So if your goal is to go after mana accelerants, that wasn't going to work out too great. So this is gonna put Domri down to 1. We'll see what Ketter can find. That's a Dreadbore. That's an important draw. Misses again. Dreadbore your Dragon.
Now, in fairness, Kent's deck has a lot of removal spells and lands post-board, but this is still not the best. Especially when your opponents had Blue Honden basically and played the whole game, and you've had Sage Owl.
And now Nyberg draws one of the more important cards in the mirror match. It's not great in this particular board state, but all it takes is one big draw from Nyberg, and it gets completely out of control. So here is Xenagos, God of Revels, power that up to take care of Domri, and Nyberg just has a Mortars left in his hand. So if you're Ketter, you need to find something that does something right now. And so he's going to start with Temple of Abandon. He's going to put that card to the bottom too. This looks like it's going to be a Domri. He wants to decide how he's going to tap. Yep, so there is a Domri. This is going to go
reveal.
Up. A Dragon. Okay. That's something that does something. He needs Nyberg to brick like really bad right now.
Yeah.
Because if Nyberg just finds like a Pulachronos, the game's just over. That's a stomping ground.
Okay, so Kent's still above water.
Yeah, that's miss number 1. All right, attack this, he says. That's going to go down to 2. They're stomping around past the turn back. Nyberg with just a Mortars in his hand. Let's see what Ketter finds. There's a Pulachronos. That's a big draw. He's going to start by ticking up. See what he finds. Why would he draw a card with Domri? Yeah. That would be ridiculous.
He just wants to look.
And now he's going to play this. He's going to fight that. He's going to battle the elves. So now Pulachronos is going to be a 6-power creature. Past the turn back here. Again, he's still got a fade draws. That's a fade. That's a Sylvan Carrier.
Close enough to a fade.
Yeah, that's a fade. Now, Devotion Count's going to go up here for Xenagos, but that's as close as a fade as you can get right now. So Kent's going to untap real quick. He'll take a draw. There's a Temple of Malice that he knew was on top. He kept it. Oh my goodness.
It's a creature, probably.
Are you sure? It is a Stormbreath Dragon. I didn't know that was possible. So he's going to put Stormbreath into play, and it looks like it's going to be time for the red zone. But how does he want to attack is the question. Does he want to leave Pulachronos back? I don't think he can afford to. I think you got to try to close this out as fast as you can.
Can something? What's the big threat card here?
Yeah, that's the big question. I think you just have to keep it moving here. So he's going to attack for 4.
Yeah, I guess the fact that Mike has multiple chump blockers makes leaving Pulachronos on defense a little more attractive, but still feels like you want to start getting in.
I didn't get a good look at what that card was. It's definitely a spell.
I believe it's Courser.
Okay, so there is Courser. It's going to reveal Stomping Ground. So Nyberg is going to gain a life. The top card is a Forest. And see, now you can see like the difference in this matchup. Like Courser doesn't really play a huge role right now, you see. Like it'll attack for 4 and provide devotion, and it'll be able to make sure that that he doesn't draw too many more lands moving forward. But the fact that it's just kind of small.
Yeah, it's definitely, the game feels about big stuff, and this just isn't one of those things.
Ketter going to draw a card here. Let's see what he finds. Let's give this one a long look. Interesting. Not quite sure what that was.
Another Stormbreath Dragon, it appears.
And the one thing, if you're Kent, that you know for sure is that your opponent's not playing spell next turn, because he has to draw the Forest.
Right.
So that's a big thing for him here, as you do see Xenagos, God of Revels. This is obviously a frightening card, because if at any point over the past couple of turns while Nyberg was bricking, and he had drawn a Dragon, a Pulachronos, even a Rampager, it gets ugly.
Yeah. For as innocuous as his board is, Kent's, as innocuous as Mike's board is, Kent's not out of the woods just yet.
Yeah, he is nowhere near as safe as it may seem right now. So he's going to play Stormbreath Dragon and attack. And Kent can actually leave Pulachronos back knowing that his life total is still going to be pretty high, and continue to play the game this way. So now Force going to come off the top. There's a Sylvan Carrier. That is, wow. Nyberg has gotten really, it feels unlucky this game.
Well, certainly these last couple of turns have not been a good stretch for him.
Yeah. I felt like he was really, really far ahead. So Ketter's going to take a draw here. Wants to figure out how he wants to go about attacking. Again, knowing that nothing's crazy is going to happen next turn.
Yeah, that's another curious thing about Courser is this spot feels, the knowledge of the top of the deck for Kent right now is so good.
It's
so
huge.
good.
It's huge. Just knowing that he can take like a bigger gamble on this turn and get like really, really aggressive, knowing, okay, there's nothing really bad that can happen to me.
Devotion next turn isn't a thing.
Yeah.
It's surprising.
Dragon's going to come into play, and he's going to attack with everybody. Now, knowing, again, that Carrot's going to come off the top, there's a chance that you can gain a life off of Courser, but I can weigh that into my math, and he's just going to concede the game now. So, Ketter, I honestly feel like I would breathe a sigh of relief here because he got out of that one alive when I did not think he was going to.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason that he was behind so much is because Mike was fortunate to get out in front of him early in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a give and take here, but there was a lot of turns there where if Mike found one of his high and back cards, it would have just been lights out. And fortunately for Kent, Mike wasn't able to do it.
And that's part of the reason that I kind of like the Black Splash is because while Kent was kind of trying to catch back up, but allowed him to catch back up was one, Mike bricking, but two, having access to removal. Because think about if it's just a green-red mirror match. He would maybe be drawing Planeswalkers in that situation, or something that doesn't really help very much, where, if you have access to Dreadboard, Ultimate Price, and things of that nature, both players have access to Mortars, obviously. It's different entirely, so.
Yeah, it's when someone on the play goes turn 3 Pelucranos in the red-green mirror, the other player is often just, all right, I guess I'm dead.
Yeah.
And, you're just... So the black cards do give you a lot of game in that scenario, especially, and then a bunch of other places as well.
But there's obviously also a cost to that, because to facilitate that, you're playing 4 Blood Crypts and 4 Overgrown Tombs, so you're starting the game off at like 17.5 or I don't, not 20.
Yeah.
Basically, you're definitely paying a pretty heavy cost because those shock lands are not even close to free. Thankfully, in the format right now, there isn't a hyper aggressive deck that people are playing. There's nothing like mono red right now that people are really doing. We've seen a little bit of white weenie, and that's actually kind of scary to play against. But if there were a hyper aggressive red deck, I don't even think this idea could be under consideration.
Yeah, it would definitely be. You would be incurring a much larger cost, certainly. Yeah.
Because you don't even have a card like, I'm going to date myself a little bit here, like Obstinate Baloth or Lockstone Hierarch, something that says, oh yeah, I got like a giant monster I can gain life with. That card really doesn't exist.
Yeah, there's Centaur Healers. I'm sure if I stretch my brain, I can imagine some life gain spells that have been played against me in the not too distant past.
Yes,
but,
sure.
It's basically just Centaur Healer is the one that I imagine at this point is, that's the mid-range threat meant to crush red decks, and there really isn't anything that's prevalent in Standard that fills that role.
Yeah, and that's out of color, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's not something that you can work with. I mean, the card that I find the most reasonable is Scavenging Ooze, but that's so slow against red, too. Like, I don't know. Obviously, you have the red experience, but I don't know how much you care about Scavenging Ooze. I think there are spots.
Some games it's excellent, and some games it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
There's a wide range on how good that card is.
Yeah.
I've definitely lost to it plenty, and I've definitely had it cast against me and thought, all right, that's just nonsense. That has nothing to do with the game that's going on.
Yeah, sure. A nice, juicy, searing blood target for me. Thank you very much.
Yeah. When the games where they go removal spell, ooze with mana up, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But the games where they cast a scavenging ooze on the second turn, they usually die.
Yeah. Now, if you're Nyberg here, you're probably pretty happy because you're on the play. And, obviously what we've seen over these first 2 games is it's all about acceleration.
Yeah.
And the fact that he gets to get out in front, presumably, with Mystic and Carriage, it gives him a huge advantage. Get to Pelucranos first, get to Dragon first, things of that nature. So we'll see what happens.
And we've seen both players willing to fire off valuable removal spells on mana creatures. These things, it matters.
Yeah. Because obviously then you're forcing your opponent to draw lands, and you want to be able to put them in that situation. Yeah, you'd like to be able to save it for the Dragon, but if they can't ever cast the Dragon, who cares?
Yeah.
Take a look at the opening hand here. It looks like Mike's got he's got lands and spells. The question is, does he have an accelerant? And it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it looks like 4 lands, Mortars, Rampager, Xenagos appears to be the hand.
It might be 2 Rampagers, and you can tell it feels like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, it's great. It's really great because when you get to the later rounds of the tournaments, you start seeing players that are really familiar with their decks and have a lot of experience playing. That is a hand that I think a lot of the room would just say, yeah, I keep. It's got a removal spell. It's got one of your power cards in Xenagos. It has mana to cast Rampager, but Mike is familiar enough with this matchup, and maybe not this exact version of the matchup, but something that's structurally very similar to know that hand's not going to cut it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about knowing what's important in the matchup, and no one's going to argue that Gorkline, Rampager, Xenagos, and Wisdom Mortars aren't important cards in this matchup because they are, but you have to be able to get ahead to make those cards be really backbreaking. Yeah. And if Kent starts off with, Sylvan Carrion on turn 2, you don't have a mana accelerant, you're behind immediately. Yeah,
and I think if that Rampager is Pelucranos, the hand's capable if it's a large impact. But if you're casting, your only spell for the first 3 turns is a Mortars. Turn 4, you play a Rampager, and then turn 5, you maybe not play Xenagos. Mm-hmm. That's a hand that most of Kent's draws are beating. Yeah. Got to do a little bit better than that.
So I think the mulligan is very, very appropriate. And Mike, to his credit, he didn't even think very long about it. He gave him a little look over. He says, this isn't going to do it, because I've seen what's important over these past 2 games, and I've played against other Green and Monsters decks, and I need Mystic or Caryatid, or a really, really good hand.
Yeah.
So we'll take a look at 6. 3. 5. I think he might have a 1-lander right now.
Yeah, he's taking on this one, so it can't be good.
Yeah.
Looks like maybe 1 land, which is a Scryland.
Oh, Scryland, I'm keeping. I don't care about the rest. I'm
Yeah.
keeping. Scryland's undo mulligans. Isn't that how it works?
Sort of. We can talk about this during the break.
Okay.
All right.
Temple of Vanis, he's going to keep. See what Ketter has. Ketter has a emphatic Overgrown Tomb and passing the turn back. That's a mountain. That's a Sylvan Caryatid. That is a Scryland undoing a mulligan. That's what that is right there. Here's a forest, and this is a Sylvan Caryatid for Kent. So if Mike draws another land right here, we're going to get to see him play some real Magic, and that is a Courser. So that's like a land.
Potentially undoing the mulligan even further, potentially.
That's a Gorkline Rampager.
Not quite.
Mulligan has not been a dungeon yet. So Kent's going to take a draw here. Let's see what he finds.
Almost.
This is a Temple. He's going to try to set his deck as he has a Domri to cast this turn. And you see him re-putting that card back on top so gently and eloquently.
Kent's got a little flourish at the table. I like it.
He does. He's got an ultimate price to cast right now, too, to take care of that Courser to prevent a land drop, and I like that. I like that play a lot.
Yeah, there's no land in hand, and so pretty critical to prevent Mike from revealing a land on the top of his deck there.
Mike's going to cast the land, though. He'll play a Sylvan Caryatid and pass the turn back here. So Ketter's going to take a draw. That is an Overgrown Tomb. This is a copy of Pulachronos, and that is very, very important given the board state. Elvish Mystic the draw here for Nyberg.
And, of course, the fact that Mike also can't really kill Pulachronos very easily.
Yeah.
Kent knows this. If this was a John DeMira, perhaps his sequence is a little different there. Maybe he just plays Dawn Bracelet next turn or what have you. But
Gorkline Rampager, that's going to come to the table. If you're Kent, you got to be thrilled about that. He quickly untaps, knowing that I can play a Domri and fight this if I want to.
this is a big boy party, and Rampager not quite big enough.
Yeah, you're not juicy enough, my friend. You're pretty big.
Yeah, you're big. Don't worry. We're not saying that you're not big. It's just you're not, you're not like capital B big.
Lowercase b.
Yeah, you're lowercase b big.
Poor Rampager being a lowercase b. Now that is a Pulachronos. That's going to fight lowercase b and get in for 5. And now Ketter's going to play a mountain and pass the turn back. I think Kent might have a mountain in his hand right now too. Or excuse me, a Mortar's in his hand.
Yep.
So he could have cleared everything up that turn if he wanted to, but he opted not to. And what he might be doing here is, and you see the Mortars, he might be trying to induce one more threat.
Yeah. Because if Mike makes some sort of play, if Mike goes land Stormbreath Dragon to try to finish off the Domri this turn, it's just so good for Kent.
Yeah. He's definitely trying to induce right now.
Yeah.
And this is going to be, it looks like another copy of Rampager. Yeah, and I feel like because your opponent doesn't play a land that turn, I feel like you might want to do it now. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see what he draws and all that stuff. See him doing the math right now. This is 3 mana at the end of turn. He's going to Monstrosity for 1. He's going to untap. Take a draw. There's a Temple of Malice, so you can set the top of his deck with a Domri. And put that card to the bottom. Going to tick on up. That is another copy of Pulachronos. I think the first one might be more than good enough, though.
Yeah. Since the first one's not dying, that's not providing a ton, but...
And that's an overloaded Mizzing Mortars to clean up the entire board. So there go the 2 Caryatids and the Rampager, and attacking here for 6. Going to put Nyberg down to 9.
Ken Ketter is just on a heater.
Yeah, that's... You can call it that.
He is on
and
a
you know
heater.
What? And you know what the best part is? He called that too. The first line in his article that he wrote for the industry standard, he said, heater, and just defined it from Webster's. So he's going to tick up this Domri. Going to put that card on the bottom. Draws a Dreadboard for the turn. So he's got the next threat covered. And we'll see how he wants to attack here. He's just going to get in with Pulachronos yet again. No Rampagers hanging out here in this deck. But it's going to put Nyberg down to 6, or excuse me, down to 3. He's going to take 6. There's a Dreadboard to take care of the Mystic. And he is going to extend the hand. So Ketter with a fist pump. He is 9-0, and I believe he is going to be able to double draw into top 8 yet again.
A Tiger Woodsian fist pump at the end of that
yes,
one.
Yes. And you see what happens. He put the Canada hoodie back on, and then he won the 2 matches. I'm not saying